I think if we start thinking about our level of communication of our instructional strategies and where we want to go, instead of the target, if we have an apple on top of our head and people are going to shoot at it, are they going to know that they're supposed to shoot at the apple by how well we've communicated? That puts a little more intensity to it. Have I communicated well enough they would know that they need to shoot at the apple, and that's the target to hit?
Well, welcome to an episode of Unlock 360. I'm your guest host today, Rick Fernandez, and we are in Westwood ISD with the one, the only, your friend, everybody's friend, number one on the court, number one in your heart, Wade Stanford, Superintendent.
Yes.
Welcome, Wade.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to be here. It's a great day to be a Panther.
And we have the founder, CEO of Lead, Teach, Learn 360, Wendy York Davoud. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for letting me be the guest host, facilitator, problem causer, all of that stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you for agreeing to do that.
And he can fulfill all of those
Yeah,
roles,
okay,
I can just tell you.
Yeah,
There will be plenty of mess ups along the way. But we are here for a serious reason because, as we all know, coaching, right, is one of the cornerstones of education, of how you're coaching your teachers, your leaders, your instructional practices. And obviously, that's your bread and butter, Wendy. So we want to hear your perspective of how you're helping school districts. But we also want to poke you a little bit and ask you some tough questions because, and Wade's my guy for that, is let's dig in to what's actually occurring on campuses and where do we need to go. So I guess the first thing to ask, Wade, is from your perspective in your time in education, what are some of the biggest challenges with growing teachers, coaching administrators?
Yeah, so I think, and Wendy, I want to tell you how much I appreciate having the opportunity to be here too. This is a lot of fun and to dig into a vital topic. And so I think one of the experiences, or what I experience on campuses right now, is that we're having a lot of alt-cert teachers that are coming in and great hearts and want to do a great job, but that traditional teacher prep program is not there any longer. And so there's a gap that we need to look at how we're going to fill. And then as we see administrators moving out of education, we're moving the great teachers up faster than we've ever moved them up. And so there's some experiences there that I think they're missing. And so that coaching aspect is vital, I think.
You know, one of the things that we take for granted, and especially in the private side, is you give people a promotion because they've done great in their role, right? And then you ask them to lead a team, but a lot of times we don't think to help them with those growth strategies or those leadership strategies when they get that promotion, because they've only been responsible for their silo or their sales or their classroom. So Wendy, I want to kick it over to you. What are you seeing as you help school districts around the country? What are some of the barriers or challenges that they're facing?
Oh, I think that keeping great superintendents, assistant superintendents, directors, principals, assistant principals, and teachers around in general is huge since the pandemic. People are looking elsewhere and thinking about doing other things.
Guilty as charged, guilty as charged.
That landscape has changed drastically since the pandemic.
Do you think that we're doing enough to build up people and really put all of our resources into growing them and supporting them from what you're seeing?
Absolutely not.
And is it because we can't? We don't have the resources? We don't have the know-how? Is it a little bit of all the above?
I think that depends. I think that depends on the district. Sometimes I think it's because they don't have the resources. Sometimes I think it's because they don't really know how. I think also what you do have is the reality of people are in the work, and it's hard work. And so to also add the responsibility of having to coach others or develop others it's a whole added layer to the day-to-day of whatever their role and responsibility is within the district. And that's a lot. It's a lot to ask. And we find that so many of the districts that we work with, it's not that they don't know how, it's not that they can't, but they really value that outside provider to give a different perspective, but also to serve a need that they have in that area because they don't have the time to really do it well.
And Rick, if I can jump in.
Absolutely.
Wendy, I think you hit on something that I think we're we're really doing an injustice is that we're asking our great teachers to coach our young teachers, and they don't have time. And I think you said that, and so we're asking that to happen. So I think that outside provider is vital. I think the different voice, the piece of being able to look at it from a lens that's not clouded, is so important.
So you think we have a habit of being too close to the problem sometimes? Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I think sometimes we can't see because we're right in the middle of it, and then I think and I'm guilty of this. I think every superintendent is guilty of this. Sometimes we get caught up emotionally with certain teachers and certain staff members.
Yeah.
And so we may not make the decisions that need to be made, and an outside person can come in and sit down and say, Wade, listen, here's the reality, and here's what's happening, and here's what needs to happen. And I think that's easier for us to handle.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, being close to it, I mean, you know this as a former coach as well. Sometimes you're so immersed in it, you know, you lose sight of all of the variables that are going on around you. And it's hard to remove yourself because it's such a personal calling. Like educators, there's nothing like it, right? You're immersed in it because it's what you believe and it's your why. It's not a paycheck. So speaking of outside providers, Wade, what are some of the things that you look for? Like, how do you evaluate? All right, I know I need some help here. I want to find the right people for the right cost that are going to serve Westwood ISD needs.
I think one of the things that you said that I think we put at the forefront that we need to move to the back burner is cost.
Okay.
I don't think that we need to make decisions based on cost. And I know that a lot of people sitting there going, but you have to. But here's the reality. Whatever you're going to spend, you're going to get something in return.
That's right.
And when we make decisions based on cost, I think we make poor decisions. So number one, I'm looking for somebody that's authentic, somebody that wants to build a relationship, somebody that wants to be a true partner with our district, that we call them a friend, and it goes into a very, very deep relationship with us. The ones that we have right now in our district that we feel are just really, really integral for our progress are even deeper than just partners. So I think it's that authentic relationship, and I think it's somebody that's going to be transparent and honest with us.
Yeah.
Somebody that's not going to sugarcoat things. They're going to just come in and sit down and say this. And so that's what we value in Westwood.
So, Wendy, from your perspective, how do you gauge what that relationship needs to look like from district to district and leader to leader? Because it's all different, right? The pulse of a district, the leadership styles are different. How do you know, all right, this is where we're going to insert ourselves?
That's interesting, and it's actually a difficult question for me. It reminds me of when I was teaching in Southern California after starting my career in A-Leaf ISD. I was put in working in a school within a school program, and so teaching 7th and 8th graders, and in the program, the other partner teachers and we had all of the students that were really, really struggling. So I had to learn to teach early literacy, and I'm like, I don't remember how I learned to read, and if it wasn't for amazing mentors and coaches, and
Sure.
I would have been out of my element. But that it just kind of gosh, how do I do that? Let me think back, because I've been doing this work for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Is it a bit like, I always think of it like double dutch, like you're kind of trying to get in there and not disrupt everything, but you got to get in there quick because there's needs to be addressed. And
right.
so when do you pick your spot to jump in, and how forceful, how transparent up front versus let me learn the culture and kind of a slow burn type of thing?
Yeah, it is a dance. It's a push and a pull, because you want to hear what's really happening, but then again, you don't want to hear what's really happening sometimes. And so it's let's get to know let's get to know you, let's get to know your needs. And then you can judge, you can sense if someone is ready in what they're ready to hear or not ready to hear. And I think we ask them too, sometimes, like, how do you want to go about this? How quickly do you want me
Sure.
to share with you what I'm seeing? Because I think that is one of the things that our districts really value about our work with them is while we call ourselves coaches, and we are coaches, we provide a big picture view because we can kind of like Wade, you mentioned being in it, right? So we can step back and see the different parts and how they're interacting.
Right.
I can't do that on day one. So I'm not going to even try to do that on day one because I'm going to miss the target. If we're able to work with school sites and also the central office, then we can get a pretty good sense. I'm thinking of not too long ago, I want to say it was late 2022, one of our districts partnered with us because they wanted to create a tool that would help them assess whether or not their instructional priorities were actually occurring in the classrooms without giving the kids a test. They wanted to be able to visit the classrooms and see it real time in action and gather that data and respond to it. And so we had a tool we could have given them. They didn't want that, which was brilliant because it's a capacity building strategy. If you develop your own, and then the people that are working together to do that, now they really are excited about using this tool that they own it. And so,
which is an indicator to you that they really want to grow.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's who we want to work with are the people that really want to grow. And anyway, the assistant superintendent said to me, this is what we want to do. I said, okay, wonderful. We'll support you with that work. We will partner with you. We will help you with bringing the team together, building a team, identifying the team members. We will help you engage the team in that. And she and I worked together. I said, so let's start with this. What are your instructional priorities? And she, shared those with me. And okay, so how well do you think everyone knows the priorities? And she said, yeah, we're good there. We know the priorities. We established those.
I know where this is going, unfortunately.
Me too. I know the
where
ending to this story.
What play are we running? Coach, what play are we running? Yeah.
And so we learned that we brought the team together. Some people were familiar with the priorities. They didn't know them that well. And what actually had been done is they were developed and shared in such a way that was for the administrators. So there was no forward-facing document for the community members or the parents or the teachers or the students. And so we helped them just, hey, let's get a one-pager that communicates your instructional priorities to any stakeholder, and let's get clear on that, and then we can talk about what does it look like, what does it sound like, what does it feel like. I saw those posters in your office. Let's see one over there as well. So, and let's get clear on that. Then we can develop the protocol that helps you go observe for those student skills and behaviors in action.
Because it's hard to move forward if nobody's communicated out where we're going.
Absolutely, right? Yes. Yeah.
So when you think about like the clarity of it, Wade, how important is that for this school year and then next school year for your instructional priorities?
Well, so I think, Rick, it's vital. And without that clarity, without that that piece that says this is where we're going to go. And Rick, on a previous show we did, literacy is a huge piece for us.
10X goals.
It's 10X go.
10X goal.
It is really, it's the only instructional goal that we have right now. And so to communicate that out, and we have a meeting on Tuesday to really start refining that. If we can't clarify that to our community, if we can't clarify that to our staff, which I've already got one staff member that said, really, 2 years? Because they saw the podcast.
Yeah.
And
it's ambitious.
It is, but we can't get there if we can't communicate that out. Because I think, Wendy, you would agree that we're going to miss the target every single time. And there's not going to be an implementation with fidelity if every staff member doesn't know what we're striving to achieve.
That's it.
And so then the coaching would look like it was ineffective if it's not being communicated out what we're trying to coach to.
Good point. Yes, indeed. And I've used the analogy of it's like putting up a dartboard. We've got dartboards all around the room, and all kinds of players throwing darts, but they're all aiming at a different board. And of the 10 that might be aiming at that board or that board or that board, maybe only one's going to hit the bullseye.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking it was a little more intense vision when you were talking about the target. I think if we start thinking about our level of communication of our instructional strategies and where we want to go, instead of the target, if we have an apple on top of our head and people are going to shoot at it, are they going to know that they're supposed to shoot at the apple by how well we've communicated? That puts a little more intensity to it. Like, I don't want somebody shooting towards me with an arrow if they're not for sure what they're shooting at.
That's going to be my question is, who's holding the apple, first of all?
Yeah. So if the apple's setting on my head.
Because you're the leader.
Have I communicated well enough they would know that they need to shoot at the apple? And that's the target to hit.
Yeah. I like that level of intensity.
Yeah.
And, and then, okay, so we're clear. Let's pretend we're clear now. Everyone's clear. We all know what we're trying to achieve. The piece that gets lost sometimes is how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And really clear, let's get really clear on that part now, how we're going to get there. And that doesn't happen just by sharing, communicating, email, face-to-face. It's the work in action. It's the ongoing, continuous, continually, we're getting together, we're talking about it, we're sharing what's happening, the practices as they unfold in our classroom, we're examining student work, we are responding to the data that is generated by iReady, we are looking at how did the students do on the latest benchmark, we're looking at their writing, we are in the classrooms observing them learn, and then we're saying, okay, what are they telling us that they can do? And I think there is a shift that, a new perspective that we often put on the work with our school districts is that, yes, we can look at instruction and instructional practices and instructional strategies, and that is important and it matters because we know there's a lot out there around what works in terms of instructional practices and strategies. But we need to be shifting at least some, if not all of the time, to what are the kids able to do?
Right.
What are our kids producing?
The deliverables, the work samples.
So because, right? I mean, it felt like a great lesson. If they didn't get it, it wasn't.
Or
no matter how many strategies I use.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And I think before I jump on that work piece, because I'm very passionate about that, I think you nailed it, Wendy, when you're talking about it's not going to be done face to face, it's not going to be done through email, how we're going to do it. And it's not going to be done one time. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's constantly coming back and revisiting and saying, where's our failures? Where are we not hitting the mark? That's where I think the coach is really important because I think they can be transparent and honest with people and say, you're missing the mark here. You don't say it quite like that, I know, in a coaching conversation, but there's something good happening, and let's refine and let's fix that. And so the work piece, I think, is vital too. And so it's actually, and one of the things that we're working to focus on in our district is what is the work that's on the desktop? What is the work that's actually on the desktop? No matter how great the instructional practice is, no matter how great that delivery is, no matter what the that they say they're covering, what's the work on the desktop? And I would be willing to venture that, and I know where ours was 5 years ago. It was 2 years below. The work was actually 2 years below grade level.
Wait, do you mean the task that the students were given?
The students working on was not aligned to the TEAC at grade level.
Yeah.
And so we've rectified that.
Okay.
But we have to go back and constantly look at that to ensure, because that is an indicator of future success. If they can't do that, then they're never going to be successful on whatever assessment we're looking at.
Remember to like and subscribe.
I want to pose a question to both of you. Wade, I'm going to come to you first. And so as a superintendent, how do you ensure alignment throughout the district? And what I mean by that is sometimes I felt like we were working hard on the campus level and doing great things in the PLC, but we weren't pulling out the data for our students and looking at that greatly affected students' learning outside of instruction. So, for instance, right, if we went into a PLC and we didn't know how frequent kids were missing class, right? Because if you have this group of absences, you know that kid is probably, there's going to be some gaps there. Or, were we aligned with our neediest students having our best teachers, right? And if not, why not? And what were the reasons? And how do we kind of make that happen? So not only from the campus level, but just from a leadership perspective, how do you ensure alignment?
Rick, I think all those things that you talked about are really, really important. The PLCs, looking at the data, definitely looking at absences, looking at kids that are not on track to graduate. Those are questions that I asked in our last meeting that when we were looking at literacy. Who on a campus knows kids by name that are reading below grade level? Mm-hmm. And then why are they reading below grade level? I think all those things are important, and I think those PLCs are, we all know how important that piece is,
sure,
and that work is. But here's where I think we're doing adequate work there, but where we're missing the alignment piece is what's actually happening in the classroom. Because we can sit in a PLC and talk, and we can show work, we can do all the things and look at all the data, but that's never going to change a kid's life.
Mm-hmm. What's happening in practice?
What's got to happen in practice, and so that's the piece that I'm working to figure that piece out. Is how do we do that? And Wendy said something that intrigued me: creating a document in which we know with fidelity that the practices that we're going to design for literacy are actually being implemented with fidelity on a day-to-day basis. We asked that question in our last meeting, and we had a resounding, no, they're not, from our leadership.
Okay.
And so that's the reason we're struggling with literacy. So we're getting ready to reset that. And so I think there's some opportunities to dig to what does that look like? Mm-hmm. What does that coaching look like? Because in the end, every teacher wants to do great. They all have a great heart. They want to do great, but they may not know how. They may just be struggling with the little pieces of it. They've heard guided reading, but they have no idea what guided reading is. Mm-hmm. And so they're struggling. So they think guided reading is terrible because they don't know how to do it. And so then it comes into coaching leaders, because leaders have to be in the classroom, because what's measured gets motivated.
That's right.
Creates motivation. And so when we're measuring, we're motivating, and we're all there. You're there from a different angle than I am with a company, but there's a measurement that motivates you.
Absolutely, and is what we're doing, right, getting results for your kids.
Right,
that is motivating, and it's exciting when we can say yes, it is.
Yeah, and so there's that piece of ensuring alignment in the PLC, then alignment in the classroom, and then alignment with our administrators, observing that.
You said so many things that I want to talk about. So many things. Okay, so
my job is done then.
Can we start with the PLC? I want to talk about that. So,
and by the way, in Westwood, we call those collaboratives.
Okay.
We do not call them PLCs.
Okay.
Because in a collaborative, everybody's voice is valued and every voice is heard, and everybody works together to come up with the end result.
But what we don't often ask ourselves in those collaboratives, that is a missing piece that you hinted at there, that I want to uncover, is how are we going to teach it? Mm-hmm. In my experience, our collaboratives at the site I was at, we were calling them professional learning teams at one point, professional learning communities, grade level collaborative inquiries, a lot of different ways that we're essentially talking about the same thing. We got caught in a every week data with those questions. And we would say, okay, so this is what's coming up. These are the next set of TEKs. This is how we're going to assess it. Okay, everyone bring in the student work, or bring in that quiz, or bring in, whatever that formative assessment is, or summative, and then we'll look at our results. But we didn't do was, now what are we, how specifically are we going to deliver it? And not after we see whether they got it or not, but proactively
Yeah.
before, so we can develop that collective efficacy or expertise that we know is like the number one way to impact learning is really when teachers are developing together, learning from each other, and building that powerhouse of instructional practice.
Because you're actually building capacity in every single teacher when you're doing
yes.
that.
Remember to hit the notification button so you don't miss an episode.
You know, one thing that I learned probably later than I should have was you mentioned like the tier 1 instruction, like the first initial. Like, when in life is the second shot usually better than the first shot? Like, usually that doesn't occur, right? And so hitting that best initial instruction and making that the gold standard as opposed to, well, if we don't do it here, then we're going to go to plan B. Well, rarely is plan B as good as plan A.
Because if plan B was that good, why didn't we do that
we would be
first?
doing, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So true. And you know, everyone is looking at multi-tiered systems of support and what are we going to do when and what are we going to do if, but what are we going to do to start with?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Let's get real good at tier 1.
Agreed.
Yeah.
when I met my wife,
That's the only way out of the problem.
That's exactly right. Because when I met my wife, asked her out on the first date, I didn't use my second best. You know, hey, can you go to dinner with me? I had to use I got to give it all I got for this one because I'm not going to get a second chance. And just your students they have one time in second grade, one time in third grade, right? And so the preaching like this has to be the best that we have. And I don't want to wait till, hey, let's see what we're going to do for remediation, because rarely do those things produce results.
Yeah, and that's powerful, Rick. That and we spent a little bit of time on this in our last meeting. Was kids have one opportunity at school, one opportunity. That's it. And so I think that as we think about the work, it has to be high quality. It has to be.
Why don't we video our lessons more? Why do we not use some of the tools? And again, I hate to throw out the athletic, analogies there, but coaching is coaching. There's a reason why sports does it the way that they do it, right? Because they need results and they need it immediate, and they have to have feedback, and they have to have the autopsy, and then they have to change on the fly weekly, or people lose jobs, people don't get scholarships, whatever's at stake. Why would we not approach it that way? It's like, Kate, if I'm going to go see a product of what's happening in class, I can't do that once a 6 weeks. I can't do that once a quarter or a handful, whatever the minimum requirement is from the state of Texas or California, wherever. How come we can't get into more of a cadence of, like, this is how we train? And we're used to this type of cadence in other parts of our life, but we won't implement it here when it counts the most.
Oh, gosh. I think there are a number of reasons for that. I think there's a real fear that people have sometimes. I think sometimes it's a lack of clarity, too. And back to we don't even really know what we're trying to do, so don't video me because I'm not sure. And then, but I think there's fear. I think fear is part of it. Sometimes I think it's, unfortunately, while we know that really learning together, growing together, the collaboration piece is so huge, we're siloed a lot. It's still, no, this is my class, these are my kids, and I think that's sometimes part of it. Sometimes I think it's just really having a shared vision and a shared, level of commitment to what you're trying to accomplish. Egos sometimes are part of the barrier. Time is part.
Always.
It's such, sometimes structures and processes are lacking. So, maybe they don't really have the amount of time they need to have the professional learning community, or they can't get the resources they need to get in there and film the classroom, which is sometimes that's some smoke and mirrors, because we have cell phones. I could video you right now. I mean, so there's so many different reasons I think that happens. And that's, again, I can't really say if videoing lessons or getting into one another's classrooms and watching lessons in real time and giving each other feedback and responding isn't something that happens as part of the culture in Westwood ISD, or in any of the districts that we might work with. I can't tell you what the problem is without learning more about
Sure.
your district and your schools and your classrooms.
Yeah.
But once I do, then I can help you identify what those barriers
I just,
are.
in general, I would think that would be more of a practice nationwide of like, this seems to be a.
Yeah, why are we waiting?
What
We
are
don't
what are
have time
waiting
for that.
on,
Our
So
children
we're-
deserve.
Yeah, we're starting to dip our toe into that. So we've got some. And I would introduce one more factor that I think is trust.
Absolutely.
Trust that video is going to be used to coach and not for anything else.
Absolutely. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
We know that, and I was looking at some stats last night, and we can't find really, I don't know that's really true, but we know that leadership is leaving the industry like crazy. And since the pandemic, and I've found studies that it's approaching 20% of superintendents are leaving. 50% of large school districts are thinking about leaving. 25% are thinking about leaving across the nation. So we know that with superintendents leaving, that's causing principals to move up faster, assistant superintendents to move up faster, and all those positions to move up faster. So what does that model look like to grow leadership in districts from your perspective? How does that work? And you've said something that I really want to dig into, and that's learning the district, because I think that's huge. And so speak specifically to what does that look like when you come into a district, and how do you analyze and how do you learn the district before you take action?
Okay, so in general, the model that we have found to be very successful for developing leadership capacity is to, at the school site level, use the vehicle of a site leadership team. That is the principal, the vice principal or assistant principals, and teachers.
Right.
For their department, for their grade level. And most districts we work with, schools have site leadership teams. They may call them instructional leadership teams. They may call them different things. Most of the time, they don't really talk about teaching and learning.
It's operational stuff, right?
It's operational stuff, yeah. And so if you shift that and the purpose of those teams to really be about, oh, this is what our collaborative learned about. This is what our collaborative saw in the student work, or, in the videos we watched of one another implementing the instructional strategies and the students' responses, or this is what our collaborative. And so if the results from the work of the collaboratives is informing at the school site level the work of the school site leadership team, and they're making decisions as a whole, you begin to develop your teachers as leaders so that they're ready to move into other roles potentially as your principals shift. Your principals start to really learn how to empower others, because I was refreshing myself on Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, and you have the positional level, the permission level, the production level, and then you get to the empowering or the people development level. And I think that a lot of times the principals kind of get stuck at, and even district office leaders, that 3rd level, which is they have the title, they have the position, they have the permission, the people like them, they've won them over, and then they've been able to produce, they've been able to get results.
Sure.
But to get to the 4th level is really now you're developing your people,
Right.
and that's where I think they get kind of stuck, and some of it is just the old way of doing things. Like, yeah, we have a site leadership team. We have some teachers that are leaders of their department or this, but that they talk about the budget, they talk about the book fair, they talk about the science fair, they talk about the field trips. They don't talk about teaching and learning.
Yeah, and so I think it's because they may not have been exposed to developing people.
Yeah.
And so this, Rick, is a piece that I'm really concerned about in just doing some stuff for you and Wendy both, is that we're moving people up quickly, faster than we've ever moved up. And we talk about when we're on the job that we see the problem out in front of us and we connect the dots and we know how to solve the problem. And connecting the dots is driven from past experiences. We can only connect the dots if we've had some experience in the past to draw from. And so when we're moving people up, they don't have the past experiences to help connect the dots. And so we refrain from having the conversation because we don't know how to connect the dots, because then it shows that we may not have the capacity.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a natural thing. I don't think it's something we sit and think about, but I think it's just natural. So how do we build that capacity in people so that we can allow them to know how to connect the dots for those past experiences? Great classroom teacher that may not have empowered people before, but it's moved up into an assistant principal or principal role.
I think in a relationship, in your interactions with them, you do have to build trust. And if you can get, and you have the trust, and you have the person, you've identified a person that wants to do the right things. You know what their passion is. You know what their why is, and you can help them let down their guard or their ego. Sometimes people just want to know. I mean, there was a point in the conversation earlier, I think you said, with coaching, you might not just tell me. Actually, we do sometimes. So one of the things about our approach to our work is that we don't just do cognitive coaching. It's not always the approach. We don't just do consultative coaching, or I'm going to tell you what to do. That's also not always the best approach. We actually like to think of our work as more personalized and collaborative, and it's integrative. You have to, again, kind of going back to the dance. It's a blended approach, I guess is the best way that I would describe it.
You're in the work.
Right.
And you can feel it with that person that you're coaching.
Yeah, but sometimes, I mean, if they just have the key pointers, because they don't have the dots, but if you can fill in the dots as a coach or as a mentor, then that's all they need. Other times, if they don't reveal that they don't have the dots because of the egos, then it's a little harder to do, and you have to, I think, maybe take more of that cognitive approach. So it's really about your coachee, I think. I mean, both of you were coaches, and you don't work with each player the same,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, 100%. One of the frustrations talking about growing leaders, and as many conferences as I've been to, and there's great, resources around the state for aspiring superintendent or aspiring principal. One thing I don't think we do very well is help the next generation through the mistakes as they're happening. We don't talk about our mistakes. We don't. We pat each other on the back and we clap and we lean on each other when you're in the seat. But what was always frustrating for me is like, why did you make that decision? Why was it the right one, the wrong one? What are all the factors that you looked at? And why was it a good decision for you versus, all right, if it's me, I'm in a new district, then it's not a good decision. Like that gap, I think, is very, very large. And so we spend a lot of time trying to emulate what somebody else did in another district, but I can't be him. Like I'm not going to have the same. Be him, yeah. I don't, as much as I would like applaud for this,
I don't know that you want to be me.
But I'm not going to have the same. I'm not going to have the same charisma. I'm not going to have this. Like I can't emulate that, right? So I need to learn from. Well, why did you make these decisions? And tell me how if this was a bad one, how did you know? When did you know? And I think those conversations have to occur a little bit more frequently because we don't let people in on that side of it, because it's scary, right? You don't want to. Nobody wants to reveal like, man, I really screwed that up.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's hard.
Even though everybody already knows.
But
Right.
everybody does already know. Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah. The board knows. They've called me.
I got 20 parents that know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. There's something you said, Rick, I think is really important there. And again, you mentioned the word how. And so a lot of providers will tell you what, and they may tell you how. And they may tell you, there's a lot of and even if it's not just telling you, they coach you to know with the questions. But I think one of the differentiating factors in what we do is we do it with you. On the job, real time, we're together, we're going in the classrooms, and we're collaboratively working with you to ensure
you're whispering to them in the classroom.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's a term we use. Then when we have a struggling teacher, we have somebody whispering to them.
Yeah.
Because if they knew, they would have already fixed it.
Yeah, and with the work that we do with site leadership teams as an example to develop the leadership of the teachers so that they can, be empowered and move the work of the school, as opposed to having this grade level or this department is doing fabulous. It's a school-wide improvement effort and strategy. With that work that we do, we actually will take on the modeling of that for the principal if he or she doesn't have those dots. Sometimes the principal has the dots. They already have the team. They're confident they have the right people at the table, but they're not sure how to structure that meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we'll help them with that.
Model
we'll do
it,
that.
right?
We actually model it.
Just
yeah.
respect for
yes.
for students, right?
Other times they do, but they still need that thought partner, that outside person, and so maybe we develop the outcomes, the goals for a particular meeting together, and the agenda together, and then we decide who's going to.
Yeah, the execution. Of
who's going to. But so we're there on the job with you, and then at the district leadership team level is very similar. So our work is about developing the leaders at the central office, and frequently. You mentioned cadence. So the other key is is systemizing all those components so that there's a feedback loop that what this team of teachers learns is informing this team of teachers, this team of teachers, this team of teachers. What all these teams of teachers are learning is informing our school-wide next steps frequently. And what the school's learning is informing our district-wide next steps. And so as a district leadership team, same thing. Frequently, they like for us to take the load of, we'll do the outcomes and agenda, and we'll model that for you. And then they'll come along and want to be more and more a part of it. And then we start to step back and out more so once they have those structures and processes and that culture is developed where that's happening. So if you can get to a place where your teacher teams are engaging in those collaborative inquiry cycles in their collaboratives, and they're using data, but again, I'm using that term broadly, but they're responding to how well the students are understanding what they're doing. They're learning from each other's practices, and they're doing essentially plan, do, study, act, or analyze, design, refine, whatever terminology you might use, the 4 questions, then they're doing that about a minimum of say every 3 weeks. And that they've learned is now informing what's happening at the school site, say a minimum of every 6 weeks, and then that's happening and informing what's happening at the district, say a minimum every 9 weeks. So you've got these 3, 6, and 9 week cycles going on that are informing one another,
right?
And one another's actions, and I think that is the cadence that you want, if not more often. But
I would have
if
said
not
more,
more often.
I would have said more often.
If not more often.
That scared me. 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wade, I know you got a burning question you want to ask Wendy, so fire away.
Yeah. So Wendy, coaching, leadership coaching is, we know it's in high demand. We know that it's a crowded space. I'll give you an example of how crowded it is. I've got 4 different people that have approached me about coaching our leadership team.
Okay.
So I'm very protective, and I want the right people. And so you talked about a while ago, and it really intrigued me, that what starts to separate y'all is that you're in the work. So in a crowded space, what separates y'all to make y'all the best coaching vehicle for us?
I appreciate that question. And I struggle with it because, and in fact, I think I just recently told Rick this. I don't think that we are in a crowded space, but as a new, we are a newer organization. We were born out of the pandemic. I'm new at this stuff. I'm still learning. How do I articulate in a way? How do I?
And you're doing an awesome job of articulating. Let me just say that.
Well, thank you.
Well,
But
and the other part of that is your vulnerability is a great thing, right? Because most people sitting up here not going to say, "Hey, I'm still learning what the best mechanisms are," because we're all still learning. It's people, right? I mean, how many times do I screw up with interactions or what have you? So the fact that you're willing to say that, to me, is like that's kind of people I won't work with my teachers, because they get it. They understand that this is always going to be a work in progress.
Yeah, because I think that may be a piece that separates you, and you don't even know that. Is that you can sit across from a teacher and say, "Hey, I'm still learning."
Oh, yeah.
Because I sit across from my teachers and say that.
Yeah. I don't think we're in a crowded space because I don't believe people really do what we do. I only know of a couple of other organizations that I would say sort of do what we do. But I could be wrong. There could be, but I think what's different from my experience in our work, a few things. We used to say customized. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say integrated. So, and that's a huge problem we see today is districts are doing this, and they don't know how to bring it all together. And again, they're so close they can't even see that that's a problem. And so, one of our clients that Kristen, one of our team members, works with a team at a school site, and they were trying to help make sense of Lead, Teach, Learn 360 versus this provider and that provider, and they drew a picture of an umbrella and the other providers underneath, because our model is going to help the district, the school site leaders, and the teachers, depending on what role you're in and your level. And your level in the organization, what role you're in, and what your primary job responsibilities are, like how do you bring those things together? So, Lead, Teach, Learn 360 was the umbrella with these pieces, because we're like going to help you integrate all the
Across
things
the district,
across the district, whether you're a teacher in your classroom. So it's not science of reading, and now it's social and emotional learning, and now it's how do we start connecting the dots? So we are addressing students' academic needs while addressing their well-being. So we help teachers think about that in their planning, and it's not diversity, equity, inclusion, and then it's right. all of these pieces are essential, but they can't be treated as separate. And there's a real need out there that leaders have to be able to synthesize and make the connections. It seems to be getting worse since the pandemic.
We're skeptical, right? Superintendents are skeptical. They're very protective of their staff, right?
Maybe said that about me.
I said superintendents. I mean, not Westwood, but I want to see it in action. So I always ask, like, would you come to Westwood and demonstrate so I can get a feel and show one of my teams or my cabinet, or I just want to see it. I want to be able to see it and feel it and understand it in action, and then have a response from staff.
And that's the big part right there, Rick.
Yeah.
Wendy, that's the big part.
Okay.
I want to see my staff respond positively towards it. Like, I already know the people that I want to see their reaction.
Okay.
Would you do that for, you see, like, I'm just a straight educator. No charge, just come on back I'll give you some coffee. We'll buy you some coffee. We'll have breakfast. But is it okay for me to throw that out there? Would you be willing to do that just to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a common entry point for us is working with the school site principal and then working with their school site leadership team. Another common entry point would be working with the district leadership team. But absolutely, and here's why. Because I'm a Texan. I was born and raised in Texas. I started my career in, again, I think I mentioned Alief ISD. I relocated to Southern California in 2005. And the pandemic brought me back home to Fort Worth. I want to make an impact in my home state. Because when I left, I was still relatively young in my career and knew what I was doing, and I've learned so much more. And yes, I would love that opportunity.
I think we stop it there. I think I got you a free demo there from a Texan, and that did some work that it sounds like you could definitely benefit from. So, Wade, as always, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Wendy, thank you for sharing and allowing me to be guest host, facilitator, all of that, and just sharing the wonderful work that you're doing for schools. So
thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I cannot say thank you, Wade, for the opportunity to engage in this dialogue around what's going to help your leaders and get results for your kids. And just really appreciate you, Rick, for hosting.
And that's the end. That's the end piece right there.
It's the
kids.
Results for kids.
That's it. I appreciate you letting me be here to have an opportunity to learn this morning.
Yeah, of course.
We'll see you next time on
Okay.
Unlike 360.